Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 9 of the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I'm Colin McFader, and I'm joined again, as per usual, by Clark Coffey.
Again, I'm still here. You can't get rid of me.
Still around, today we're going to be going over Lesson 10. I know it gets a little bit confusing there, but Lesson 10 of the Herzog podcast. Sorry, the Herzog Masterclass. We are the Herzog podcast. And this one talks
about
all
the
about...
Herzog Masterclass.
Exactly, yeah. This one talks all about shooting strategy, and so it's sort of related to our last episode, which was about basically everything going on before the cameras are rolling and, like, you know, set rules and ways to prepare yourself. But now this is about the actual shooting and the the point when the camera is recording,
actually rolling,
how to get to that point and how to sort of more, I guess, rather than the set rules, a little bit more of a creative tinge on this one about like a creative process to get you to that point.
And so right off the bat, Herzog says, "Come unprepared."
Yes, that's his big thing.
Oh my gosh, and it's also, you know. So I've seen this quoted in other places. If you read reviews of his masterclass, and I think he said this in other interviews as well. Mm-hmm. I know he has. It's one of his more famous kind of, I don't know, controversial, but he definitely draws a line in the sand here, and he's like, storyboards are the instruments of cowards.
Yes.
And if you want to do your voice here, you can, Colin. But what a great line.
Instrument of cowards. Yeah. No, I mean, and it's an interesting, because I think, again, it's one of those things that's it's like a soundbite. And so he does admit later that they are often needed for things like sound, special effects and things like that. But I do. Do you storyboard, Clark? Do you?
So I'll tell you. So I have never storyboarded, but I have also never shot a scenes that had complicated special effects or really complicated choreographed action. Mm-hmm. But what I have done is this. So for other shoots, what I have done in preparation is I've made shot lists for myself. So not storyboarded, but I have written them out. And for myself, what this gets me doing is it puts me in a very visual headspace where I can start to visualize the film scene by scene by scene, moment by moment by moment. Now, it's not necessarily the case that when I arrive on set, I'm following this to an absolute T. But I do have to say that I don't show up unprepared. Mm-hmm. Now maybe, look, Herzog is clearly, he's a gifted filmmaker, and clearly he's got a lot of films under his belt now. And so a lot of things that are just intuitive muscle memory type things to him may not be so for other directors with less experience. So, when I'm shooting something that's got any kind of complexity to it whatsoever, I do put myself through the exercise of creating shot list, and I try to push myself past, past the low-lying fruit.
Well, I think it's interesting that you say, like you said earlier, that when you shot list, it's for you. I almost find that you don't follow it to a T. What I find is that shot listing opens me up and allows me to be more creative on set, because I have a list that I know. So I know, like, it's kind of counterintuitive, but because I have a shot list, I know what I need to get, and that saves me the pressure of having to worry, am I going to miss this shot? And allows me to go, let's throw a shot in here, let's add a shot there.
I riff off of it, right? So a good way to think of it is like, it's almost, it's like if this were the sheet music or something for a piece, but instead of playing it note by note by note, it's like it allows me to improvise. I take off from that place, right? But I think for me, it just helps me break down the script, and it helps me put it into kind of these visual blocks, and which are just their setups.
And I find that too that storyboarding sort of is the antithesis of that. That I find that storyboarding really locks you into a visual style, and
I think it's a different way of thinking, right?
Yeah.
So when I shot list, I am, it's really activating my imagination, right? It's like I'm having to, I'm not taking my visualized imaginings and putting them on a piece of paper and then going, onto the set and then replicating that picture that I've drawn on a piece of paper, right? It's still language. It's not visual. And so there's still
there's the moment where your brain has to visualize it.
Right. And so, I don't know if Herzog, I'd be curious to kind of hear what he might say about shot list versus storyboards. But, and for me, I think, the more shooting I do, the more comfortable I get improvising. But for me, it's, I try to, I don't want to get on set and then just grab the low line cliched shots, right? The low line fruit, where it's just like a twofer and an over the shoulder, and it's like I might as well be making a soap opera. I'm trying to, and not just for the sake of it though. I mean, I'm not sitting here like, oh, let's Dutch angle this thing just for the hell of it. Obviously motivated by story, motivated by story, but it's right. I mean, look, movies are visual mediums, and which of course you would think, yeah, of course they are. But look at how many films and television shows don't seem to understand that it's a visual storytelling
rely on exposition,
because it's basically shot theater, and a lot of television is shot theater, especially, but a lot of films are too. And so, at least for me, I'm trying to think of how much information, how much story can I convey visually.
Exactly.
And so it's like trying to achieve a density of visual storytelling, at least for me, requires preparation.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and I just said, but if I don't know how many films has Herzog shot now, 40 some odd, I'm not sure. When I get to a place like that, hopefully, if I ever get to a place like that, I think he's at a level of experience where these kind of things are muscle memory for him. It's not for me yet. Yeah. So,
I will say though about storyboarding, and this is kind of almost proving his point. So the feature that I'm directing coming up, of course, is my first feature that I'm directing. And Woohoo! The producers and I sort of reached an agreement where I said, okay, to ease your nerves, I will storyboard it. And so in that instance is essentially literally the Instrument of Cowards, because it is about easing nerves.
Yeah.
So it does kind of prove his point that like normally I wouldn't. I don't storyboard. I don't find that they ever help me.
But you had to kind of prove yourself.
But I said, you know what, I'll and they're being very open to the idea that it's not going to be steadfast. We probably won't even have the storyboards on set. It'll probably just be kind of a pre-thing where we go through just the shots and kind of go, okay, here's what I'm thinking of for this moment. But yeah, it's literally in that instance technically an instrument for cowards.
Well, and I think that's a really good perspective to bring to it, and I think that's likely at least some of what Herzog is actually speaking to. Sadly, the coward may not be you, the director. The coward may be your investors or producers, and it may be something that you have to do on occasion. In order to direct the film, in order to keep the film financed and to keep your position in it. So those are situations that you may come to. Now, of course, you can do the storyboard, and then once you get on set, do your thing. But sometimes, that's a piece of the bureaucratic machine that you have to do to keep the money happy.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think that's in essence exactly the point, is that I think that it is a lot of, and of course this episode isn't necessarily about that negotiation. That was a few episodes ago, but just to reiterate the points from that, so much of it is about the give and take. So I know I could have totally put my foot down and said, no, I'm not storyboarding. I don't storyboard, blah, 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 blah. But I said, okay, we can go through storyboards so you know what I'm thinking of for these shots. However, I put in like a little kind of stipulation where I sort of said, I don't want them on set. I don't want to hear anything about it if the shot that we're doing doesn't look like a storyboard, or I don't want it. That's my only caveat in this, that I'll do the storyboards but I'm not going to use them on set. And I'm not going to.
These aren't going to become our Bible that we can't deviate from.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that was smart of you, I think, and that's good advice for people. If you happen to find yourself in that situation where you're storyboarding for someone else, because it's their requirement. If you can work in some kind of stipulations like that where they're not on set, or they're on set but they don't have to be the end all be all alpha omega. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that even in that instance too, it's one of those things where I think it's just keeping everyone happy too, like keeping everyone comfortable. But
sometimes you got to do you got to do what you got to do. Yeah.
And as Herzog said in the previous episodes too, what's it that he will, of course he takes no for an answer. Of course he's willing to compromise. And the only time, actually, just a real quick touch on the special effects bit too. It was interesting that I understand in CG heavy movies with big effects sequences why you would use that, but the limited experience I have in special effects, I've almost found more interesting to not storyboard them and just, again, to shot list or kind of give an idea, because then I can have fun kind of working on those effects afterwards. There was one effect, again, very incredibly simple, where I had to get words. I had to basically have figured a way for somebody to have a conversation with a piece of paper, that they would write down a message on the paper and then words would appear on the page.
Right.
And I wanted to do it in camera. I wanted to get it so that it would, it would fit in. So basically I had made up like 50 different copies of this piece of paper with trying to make the handwriting identical, and then I would just in one shot have the one piece of paper without that note and then swap out the piece of paper. But it was one of those things that I figured out on set. I didn't or during tests.
Now wait, you did this effect in camera?
I did it in camera, and
was
then
it like a stop motion type? I'm trying to imagine.
What I did was I painted out so I had the one so let's say that like the line that the character writes is like hello, and then the line that appears is good day. What I did was I had one note that said one piece of paper that only said hello, and then I had another piece of paper that said hello and good day, and then I tried to copy the handwriting exactly for the hello so it looked like it was the same paper.
Right.
And then I painted out I had the initial hello plate without the good day, and then I painted out the good day on the other plate and matched them, and then kind of did this weird almost like ink effect coming through the page.
Okay.
But again, I mean that's not a huge
kind of a
battle
dissolve,
scene,
but not to
almost
make this
a dissolve.
all about okay.
But it was
but it's
it was one of those things again that I came up with on testing, because I was like I don't know what this is going to look like, and I think that maybe that's something that could be applied to those larger battle scenes and things like that, where you're thinking
it's interesting. I mean, I have zero. I mean, I have flat out zero experience working in extremely heavy special effects laden films, and I always use Marvel movies as an example because they seem to be the epitome of these type of films. But even other films can have an extensive amount of special effects. I think we might have talked about Fincher, and he doesn't make action movies in that way in the vein of Marvel at all, but his films have quite a bit of special effects work, a lot of CGI as well. Just a different type of application of CGI. But I would imagine the more complex you get, the more pre-visualized, the more... I mean, they've probably got to plan these things to within an inch of their life, I'm guessing. And so maybe for simpler special effects, you can kind of, sort things out on the day on set. But I'm guessing, from what I've seen, when you really have some significant complex special effects, these things are like previs like crazy. I mean, it's like they've got like a PlayStation 4 game of the whole scene before that. You know what I mean? With all this crazy previs software they've got out now. And and it'd be interesting to speak to some people who've done extensive acting work on a film like that. I'm imagining that is one of the larger challenges, working in an entire green screen, environment with little to nothing to react to. It's tough. So props to people like Robert Downey and, a lot of these actors who give pretty darn good performances, and in a green suit in a green room talking to a tennis ball. It's pretty impressive.
I mean, there is
Not
that
to get too digressed
there's that the famous shot of George Lucas working on the Star Wars prequels where he's like highlighting what is real in the storyboard and what's going to be CG.
I mean, and I feel like those are great examples of, and people have talked about those films to death, but there's great examples of performances that just had to have suffered horrifically because there was nothing to react to. There was nothing real on set. But not to get too far away here from Herzog's Masterclass, But well, that's cool though, and I think with smaller, right, and I think it has to do a lot with whatever as a director, your experience level with these kind of things are going to dictate to what extent you can hold back and not do too much planning versus figuring things out on set. I mean, I don't think I'd recommend if you have no idea how you're going to get an effect shot or you've got a complicated choreographed scene. I don't know, I don't know about showing up and not having any ideas about how to do that.
Especially if you're beginning.
If you're beginning. Yeah. But I have a hunch, though. I have a hunch that, when Herzog says, he doesn't storyboard and he's kind of coming unprepared, my hunch is that he's actually quite prepared. Yeah. It's just that he hasn't premeditated every single action.
And he's open to flexibility.
I would never want to put words in his mouth. This is just my interpretation. But I think unprepared and not premeditated to the nth are not the same thing. I imagine he's actually very prepared when he walks on set.
I agree.
Yeah. So once he's there, Herzog talks about working himself into a state of intense vision during the shooting himself. And this is really compelling to me. He, at many different areas in the filmmaking process, Herzog talks about the importance of urgency and the importance of like working yourself into an intensity. And I think this is super interesting. And again, this is just my interpretation. Obviously, I'd never put words in his mouth but my reading of that, what that is to me, I feel like he's clearly somebody who works in an extremely intuitive level.
Yes.
And, it's like there's this Myers-Briggs stuff, right? These personality tests. And, some people are thinkers, some people are feelers, some people are, intuitives, and other people, there's all these different kind of personality categories, which I can't remember them all right now. But I know for myself, I've tested as more of a feeling intuitive type person. And this kind of stuff really resonates with me. And so it really speaks to me, and maybe this is part of why his films and kind of his philosophy of filmmaking really speak to me in general. I feel like we maybe come from some of the same places, but that's the sense that I kind of get, that he really works from a feeling intuitive place, and it's so much more about
instinctual almost.
And like working yourself into an emotional intensity that propels you as opposed to a thinking and analyzing and planning, right? Almost like I would imagine like Fincher maybe is more of a director that works from that angle. Of course, I could be completely wrong here, but just kind of the like overgeneralizing perhaps a little bit. I could see Fincher being like a thinking, planning, analyzing, cerebral kind of director.
I think you're not wrong there. I think he is quite that. I mean, which is funny too, though, because I think a lot of people get that wrong. And again, not to digress too much, but I think a lot of people get that wrong about Kubrick. Is that a lot of people think that Kubrick was so meticulously planned, dictator on set who everything was planned out in advance, whereas he would very often get onto set with no storyboard, no shots planned, and kind of plan the day as it went on and just kind of improvise and would go, why don't we, there's those famous shots of him walking around the Shining set with a viewfinder sort of going like, where do we want to shoot this from? And so I think that's, again, I think people build up these personas about a lot of directors where it's like, what's good, what's the best way to direct this?
We're all a mixture. Yeah, I mean,
exactly. That's the thing.
We're all a mixture. All of us operate at different, levels of all of these metrics. Of course, none of us are completely intuitive and then, not analytical. I mean, that's, we're a mixture of all these things. But it's the sense that I get, as I try to suss out what Herzog's speaking to in this lesson, where he's talking, and that's how I apply it to myself. And it's one of the reasons I love. We just talked in our last episode about working right next to the camera. Right with actors, right there. It's a physicality. It's such a feeling, intuitive, emotional thing. Or at least for me, when it's working, it is. Yes. And I actually almost feel like it's that analytical kind of cerebral part of me is actually like diminished, or it's like when I know I'm really in a flow, those things actually kind of recede quite a bit for
Mm-hmm.
me. And I
Yeah.
really feel like I'm moving and acting and making decisions from a physical place, if that even makes sense.
No, I know what you
Um,
mean. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So for me, Herzog, this really makes sense to me, and it really speaks to me. Now, of course, how you do this, everybody's got to kind of find your own way. I mean, this is an integral part of everybody's creative process that some people are challenged with kind of refining over a long period of time. Some people seem to intuit their creative process out very quickly and early in life.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to work pretty hard to refine and find mine. I don't know what your experience has been about yours, um, but everybody's got to find their own ways
Yeah.
to work themselves into this kind of emotional intensity. But I love, I just like, it would be so amazing. So obviously, you and I, we're fans of Herzog. This is clear. If you're listening, you're probably also a fan of Herzog. Otherwise, okay, that's cool that you're
Well,
listening.
they
But
might be a fan of us.
maybe they're well. Uh, that's an awful sweet thought. But I would so love to be on set on a film with Herzog. I
Mm-hmm.
love how he talks about how this, kind of, coming without this premeditated, fully thought out plan keeps your crew and your cast on edge. It keeps them sharp, and I would love to experience it. I would
Yeah.
love to experience it. I think, there is definitely an interesting aspect to think about this, right? If you don't storyboard, if you don't have everything fully premeditated and planned out to the end, I would imagine that really does, right? I mean, obviously within reason. I mean, your actors have to know what scenes you're going to be shooting
Yeah.
that
You gotta have
day,
like
right? I mean, it
that amount
can't
of
just
planning.
come
Yeah.
out of the blue, but to really be physically there with your DP, with your, with your actors, blocking scenes out, or setting up shots and kind of working things in the moment. I think that really does help keep people present.
Which again is where I think again, and I think not to assume anything, but I think that Herzog would agree, which is that I prepare so that I don't have to worry about that, if that makes
Yes,
sense, right?
yeah,
Like
it absolutely does.
I prepare to, and kind of again, like we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, like I prepare my shot list so that I can go off of it,
Yeah,
so that I don't have to follow it.
yeah,
And I think that that makes things so much more easier and so much less stressful. Of
yeah.
if you're stressed and if you're thinking about like, oh, do I have
Oh, it
this need
throttles
and
your
that?
creativity.
Yeah.
Stress. I feel like anxiety is the
Hmm.
creativity killer
Yeah.
for me, at least. I mean, there's an edge that's good to have, and that's
Hmm.
Terzog's talking about keeping the cat crew and cast on edge. There's an edge. There's like an excitement that's good to have. Anxiety, at least for me, not so much. Anxiety will definitely, I imagine, like two hands around my, it's like creativity's throat, and it's no good for me.
Yeah.
I think some people may respond differently to that, but yeah, for me, I have to have kind of a energy is good, anxiety not so much.
No. Exactly.
uh, Now we're getting into a topic that Herzog covers here in this lesson that I I definitely have some specific opinions about, and I'm really interested to hear yours. Shooting coverage,
Hmm.
and wow, I have definitely seen some different theories in application on many different shoots in this area.
Yeah.
But we'll start with what Herzog says here in this lesson, and then Cullen, I want to hear your thoughts on this. But Herzog says avoid too much coverage.
Hmm.
As a matter of fact, he basically says here in this lesson that he shoots very, very little coverage, to the point that like people can be concerned. His producers can be concerned, the studios can be concerned. But he specifically mentions one of his actors, Nicolas Cage, being thrilled. And as an actor, yes, you would generally be thrilled because,
Yeah.
wow, it takes a ton of the tedium and monotony out of a shoot if you don't have to be there shooting coverage all day long. But so Herzog's stance is avoid shooting much coverage. Cullen, what do you think?
No, I agree. I don't like coverage. I don't. I there was a movie that came out last year, I believe, or 2 years ago, the Bad Times at the El Royale. I'm not sure if you saw that.
I didn't.
It was all coverage. It was insane. It was like
Well, tell
someone
me,
would
yeah,
go over
so
to.
so why do you not? What do you think of like when you say I agree with Herzog, I'm not a fan. Tell me a little bit more about. I mean, what do you see as
I
the
just know
cons of it?
I think it's a big part of it is learning to direct like an editor and to
Yes,
know where you're going to cut and
it's
what
a
you're
good
going to
way to
cut
put it.
to
Yeah.
in when you're shooting. And I think that a lot of people that don't think that way and haven't trained themselves to think that way, they shoot a ton of coverage because it's and again, there's an understanding to that where it's like, hey, maybe they want to make those decisions in the editing room, but
Well, and
um,
I think that's kind of what it is. I
mhm,
think that what you're doing is procrastinating on your decision making. That's how, I mean, so for me, so I agree. I agree with you and I agree with Herzog. I have worked on projects where I've worked with people who have the exact opposite take, where their
mhm.
mentality is no, no, no. Let's get everything, let's shoot everything we can possibly shoot. And that
Yeah, no,
way,
I
when we're going back into the editing room, because it's tempting, right? It's tempting. Let's think
yeah.
about it. It's like, okay, because here's the mentality. Generally, it's like this. Okay, look, we've spent all this money up until this point. We have everybody here. We have the actors. We have the crew, and we're on location.
Let's get it
Why
all. Yeah,
would right? Like, why
yeah.
would we not shoot everything we can possibly shoot? I mean, and on surface face value, this makes sense, right? This makes kind of a logical kind of sense. It's like, well, yeah, of course. Let's shoot everything that we could possibly shoot. That way, no matter what happens in editing, we've got it. Like we can do something with it.
Yes,
But I
and
could not disagree more with that because
exactly.
I
Yeah.
think what you're doing a couple things in my opinion. So first of all, you're procrastinating on all the decision making that should be taking place right there on location. You
Hmm.
should be deciding what the film is going to look like right there. And like you said, you should be thinking, directing as an editor. You should be able to visualize the story in your head. I mean, you should have been visualizing it long before you're on set, but
Hmm.
this should be the execution of those visual decisions. And if you're just shooting everything, then you're pushing all of those decisions back to the onto the editor. And even if you are the editor, if you the director are the editor, which happens of course on a lot of smaller projects, you're still that procrastination will not help you. It
No.
definitely won't help you if you're giving all this footage to another outside editor, but it won't help you either if you're the editor. And what I feel like is that it dilutes
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah, it makes
It
it's like spreading too much butter over like a big piece of, or too little butter over a big piece of bread, right?
I was
It's
going to
like,
say you can't have too much butter,
no, you
Colin. Come
can't.
on,
No.
man. Like what's I don't even understand
um,
this language that you're speaking.
but no,
But
I think that it does exactly that.
yeah,
It loses the focus.
absolutely.
You should be,
Absolutely.
if you're not, if you don't have an idea or a vision enough in that day's shoot to know the shots that are going to appear on
Yep.
the screen or hopefully appear on the screen,
Yeah.
then what are you shooting
What
for?
are
You're
you
just
doing?
at that point, you're as Herzog says, you're a garbage collector. Um,
Absolutely. Yes. Think that. And I love, like, he has such a wonderful way with language, and
yeah.
which makes sense, of course. But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely. And I've had this problem in specifically in documentary films that I've made, and we're going to get, he specifically touches on some advice or suggestions for documentary filmmaking here. But, I've had that problem
Hmm.
where I was not focused enough, and and I'm still working on this. I'm learning with a narrative film. I feel like I'm more in touch with this. In documentary filmmaking, I'm working on it, where I have a specific vision for the film, um, and it's a balance for me of letting the documentary tell me or show me where it wants to go,
Yeah.
but having a concrete vision as well, and actually taking the reins and shaping, not just like, being a fly on the wall and letting the footage go where it will, but actually, having a vision and
Hmm.
directing that documentary such that it conforms to some extent to my vision, although maintaining flexibility, of course, to go with where the footage takes you. But I mean, I've come back from shooting documentary footage with so much footage I can't even do anything with it.
No, yeah,
I'm like
it's yeah.
paralyzed. I'm paralyzed because there's so many hours of footage, and now I'm sitting here editing it, or I'm trying to pass it off to another editor, and they look at it and they're overwhelmed. They're like, I don't know what do you want to do with this? You have 100 hours of footage. So I've been down that road. Um, Still learning when it comes to documentaries. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
shooting
it can be really
coverage.
difficult.
Yeah,
It can be really good, especially documentary can be really difficult to prevent yourself because there's times when you're like, oh, let's just let the camera roll
right.
and get everything, and that can be really useful.
Well,
But
and
it
this
can
comes,
also, I can
yeah.
see where it can just be absolute hell.
I mean, I almost wonder if you could trick yourself into thinking, okay, I'm shooting with film. It's like you likely are not, especially with a documentary. You're not going to be shooting with film, but it's almost like if you could like convince
I mean,
yourself,
in the very
it's
least,
like
I would say on cameras like the one that I have now, if I'm shooting in RAW on
at least you're going to run out of space.
I could run out of space, and most cinema cameras don't really have a delete function on them. A lot of
Yeah,
them don't.
it's a
So
pain in the
you
butt. You've got
are
it right. You've got to.
yeah.
Yep.
You of course have more space than a magazine of film would, but
and it's time as opposed to money, generally
yes,
speaking, because
yes,
you could take the time and upload the footage and da 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 da. You could do these things, but so I mean, sometimes in whatever ways you might be able to kind of game it and trick yourself into working with some kind of urgency and scarcity.
hmm
But so I've been down that road, so I can definitely speak from experience. And I've also been down that road on other projects for narratives where the idea was let's just shoot everything,
hmm
and it just that lack of focus just really and that procrastination of decision making I have literally never seen it help a film one time. I mean, I've seen some small instances where it was like, oh, thank God we had that insert, or thank God we had this angle. Um, but as far as actually helping a film, or as far as actually making a film better, or making actually having the story come together in editing, I've never seen it.
And you know what I think the issue is? I think that there's a huge misunderstanding of, say, like a movie, for example, like Apocalypse Now, where
Yeah,
the first work print cut was like 5.5 hours. And sure, that works for that movie, and maybe that's how Coppola likes to do that. But I think people see that and go, "Oh, that means that my first cut should be super long, and it should be." And it's one of those things that happens so often with
yeah,
film is that people assume that just because it's the way that somebody who's famous works, that they
right,
have to work like that, and that's how they're going to make their movies well. But no,
right.
if anything, a lot of the times my initial cut will be the shortest possible version I can do of it, so that I can then extend things and
Oh,
leave
that's
spaces
rare.
to breathe.
I mean, I
It's
have
not
that.
always like that, but
Yeah,
there have been times when it has
sometimes.
been like that, where it's like, I've been like, you know what, that's too quick. I need to give that a moment to, especially with
Yeah,
composers, is that I very much work with the composer in the editing process, so that if my composer Eva can say, hey, can you add 2 seconds onto there, because I think that would be a really nice sting for a moment there for the music.
hmm,
And so I'll actually work with my editor to compose to music. Of course, that
right,
is if there is music in the moment.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that
Interesting.
people, like you said, and like as you said earlier, how we're all kind of a mix between these things. That people, I think, my biggest piece of advice to especially when I'm teaching classes, is don't look at what somebody famous or successful did and just try and replicate that, because the likelihood is that they're doing that because it works for them, and it probably won't work for you. Just come up with a way to do it for yourself that then feels comfortable and efficient for you,
Yeah.
as opposed to just going, well, Coppola did a huge cut for his first one, so that's how all of my first cuts will be.
And
Um,
also you don't have the context of anything.
yeah.
That may actually be something. I'm just making stuff up here, but it's like Coppola's success may be in spite of that, right? That may be a
hmm
challenge for him that he's having to work through.
hmm
That you actually could be copying a maladaptive or a challenging aspect of his creative process that he hasn't refined in himself. So without context, yeah, it's ridiculous to copy some piece of somebody else's creative process and try to incorporate that yourself.
hmm
Yeah. Context is key, and yeah, you've got to find and even with all of this, I mean, hopefully people, if you watch this masterclass, Herzog has done this, and he's given so many interviews about filmmaking, um, and there's so much content out there. But really, I mean, the idea is not to copy mindlessly any of these
No.
aspects
Yeah,
of
exactly.
filmmaking or creative process. And that's why we kind of like to say that this is, we just use this class and his films and his works as a jumping off point to kind of discuss our own creative process and to
Yeah.
help us find our own. So it's never like, oh, Herzog said don't do this, then okay, I'm never going to do it, or Herzog said
And I think that that's a
let's
huge issue with a lot of film education these days, especially
yeah.
online. is that you'll get, these channels that will go into the specificities of how Deakins lights a shot, and it's like, now you've got to do this exactly like that. And it's like,
right.
Come up with your own way. And but no, I think that, to get back into the lesson before I kind of derailed us.
That's okay.
I do think that the coverage thing is exactly, for me, I think the reason that I don't do coverage often too is that I enjoy shooting things in long, sort of uninterrupted takes, which can on occasion be more.
Talks about, as a way to potentially save some time.
And I don't even do that really as a time saver. To me, it's just, and again, we discussed this a little bit in the Working with Actors episode, but it's something that I find I'll get better performances out of actors if I can just allow them to do their thing, and then allow the camera to do its thing.
I agree.
In a take.
Yeah.
But on top of that too, I find that often compositionally it makes for a more, like, if I'm sitting at if I have a conversation at a table, instead of doing over the shoulder, sometimes I find that these conversations would be more interesting if they're sitting almost diagonal to each other at the corner, and they can really get close to each other and act that way and lean into each other, and the conversation now becomes something that's playing on screen as opposed to just this division of the two actors on the set.
Well, it's nice to play around too. I mean, obviously, there's, you can get to a place where you're shooting a oneer that's so long and complicated that it's, it's much more complicated and takes much longer to set up and shoot than it would be if you were doing traditional coverage. So everything kind of depends and has its boundaries, but also it's fun to play around with, recomposing shots on the fly within a single take. Can be really fun and can break things up, as opposed to, again, just a traditional, two shot over the shoulder, which is, such a staple, and it's hard to get away from that entirely. But it can also be a pleasant exercise or a fun experience when you're utilizing it, of course, to tell your story. But to compose on the fly, to move from one composition to another. I mean, I personally enjoy it, and I think a lot.
And Herzog loves that feeling of like the floating camera too. Like,
right.
He uses that so often, where the camera's sort of exploring the space.
Yeah. It's absolutely, and it's of course, depending on your project, but where it's appropriate. But absolutely, it can using kind of a more subjective or involved camera, and really making the camera a character, so to speak, in the story.
And that comes into, I find that, honestly, for me, looking at genre is a really good way to explore things that you would do without genre, kind of stripping that away. But for example, choreographing an action scene, or even just an intricate kind of dialogue scene through, like, say, an apartment, but looking at the way that West Side Story shoots their musical sequences. The way that things like that work, or Singing in the Rain, or whichever, those classic Golden Age Hollywood movies where the camera feels like it's a part of the dance, and then you kind of take that and go, okay, let's strip away the music and the dancing. How could I make the camera feel like it's a part of the conversation, that it's almost like peeking in?
Horror is a great genre to do this with as well. Yeah, because horror has such a subjective camera, such an involved camera, and so that's a great point. Taking a look at stylistic choices that are often associated with different genres and applying them in different or unique ways. That definitely can be a helpful exercise. But it's, here Herzog is talking about saving time. And again, that can be a time-saving device, or if you're, shooting like the intro scene to Goodfellas, that may not so much be a time-saving device.
Yes, I mean, and that's exactly it. Is the complexity of those setups? So depends on how much you're gonna, how much time you're gonna spend on it. If you're doing a oneer for the sake of doing a oneer because it's the impressiveness.
Well, that's
the oneer. Then you
should stay away from that, regardless. Yeah.
Whereas I think that. And Spielberg actually is really interesting oneers, because Spielberg, unlike that opening of Goodfellas, the Copacabana, and unlike a lot of other directors who use oneers, Spielberg's oneers are actually very interesting because he almost hides them, very much like Kurosawa.
Does. There's a great YouTube video.
Yes, it's every frame of painting.
There you go.
Yeah,
Every frame of which, and just let's like categorically just say recommend that if you haven't seen Every Frame of Painting,
fantastic channel.
the
Yeah,
YouTube's it's a YouTube channel, a series of videos, extremely well done. I think sadly the author of those videos has stopped making
yeah.
them.
He said that he basically he always had an idea that it was going to run its course
Yeah,
of like the amount of episodes he did. So luckily, it wasn't like a sad end. It was very much a
no, it
planned
was
end.
yeah,
But
but
no, it's
highly
a
recommend.
great example of where I think again Spielberg is one of those people that again uses it both for efficiency of time on set, but efficiency of storytelling. That
Yeah,
it's like rather than again coming up with this intricate sequence with 1,000 moving pieces, the opening of Touch of Evil or something. Spielberg's using oneers because it's why cut when I could just have this person
yeah,
walk over there and have the camera follow them,
yeah,
and then and Kurosawa is a great example of that too, where it's like you almost have with the oneers a great way to hide them is have every shot have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you start on
yeah.
a close up, and then instead of cutting to a medium, just pull back the camera,
Recompose. Yeah,
and then you're in a medium. And then I think and that's another thing again that is super related to those 50s musicals. That you look at musicals from the golden age of Hollywood, 50s and 60s, and you look at ones compared to today, where it's almost like a cut on every beat,
oh
and there's
yeah,
there's
hyper.
constant cuts and um, I think that it's incredible that you look back then and you feel so much more involved and immersed in the story, even though the editing is so much more tame and calm, and is really, if anything, restrained, and which I think it works for those movies
Yeah, it doesn't
wonderfully
have
and
to
can
be
work for anything.
flamboyant. Yeah,
No, exactly.
wonders don't have to be flamboyant. I think that's a great point, and you've mentioned some great examples. And I would recommend to other people out there, other directors, to take a look at those examples.
Hmm.
And those are definitely, I think, setups that could save quite a bit of time. You're shooting a lot less coverage, and I think that they can contribute significantly to better storytelling.
I will say
So,
though, if you're young or if you're starting out, go crazy. That sounds kind of funny, but when I was in early high school, I used to do crazy camera movements as much as I could and
yeah,
do tons of editing. I remember when I was going when I was graduating high school and I was applying to film schools and stuff just for I wasn't sure if I wanted to go yet and just wanted the options. Like I did this crazy samurai sword fight where there was like this
that's
flashback
awesome.
sequence and there was these crazy lights and fog and
Yeah,
the editing was insane and there was the movement, there was push-ins that were so quick and all this stuff.
right.
Go crazy, like feel free to do that, and
Well,
then
absolutely. Yeah,
because now I feel that like I've looked at that and gone, oh, I'll pull back these things, like I'll kind of harness that energy but not make it so outwardly
sure.
flamboyant like you
You've
said.
got to you've got to push far to kind of realize, yeah, absolutely, there's no harm in really getting wild and crazy, and exploring the boundaries of techniques. Absolutely, I think that's
I
a
mean,
great
even you
point.
look at the starting careers of a lot of famous directors. You look at PTA, as we mentioned earlier.
Yes, great
His
example.
like
Look at,
Hard Eight and Boogie Nights. They're
well,
really
especially
like
Boogie Nights and Magnolia.
you got those oneers, and
Yep,
you've got the long steady cam shots, a very Jonathan Demme kind of
a lot of
styled
movement. Yep,
movement. But now you look at his shots, and they're composed and they're
solid,
accurate, and
solid, and
they're
almost stoic sometimes.
and I think one of the reasons that I would say go back and watch old Hollywood and watch movies from the 40s and 50s because the cameras were so big and heavy that they didn't have the
Right.
option to go crazy with them. So
Yeah.
everything had to be super accurate and there was a level of preciseness
Yeah.
that even the focus puller didn't have a monitor. They had to know the distance. So
Yeah.
there was this level of being completely precise, and even when there was movement in the camera, that you had to be so accurate with it. And I think
Right.
that is such a great way to learn how to, even if you're shooting on a DSLR and you've got a big monitor in front of you and you don't need to worry about the weight of the camera or the focus or whatever. Absolutely still try and emulate those styles, and if not for just a training exercise, because you'll find that being reserved often and being kind of restrained in those ways will keep that energy up, but it'll just make things less hectic. It'll make things look more precise and more more pointed, if anything is
Right.
a word for it, like you're pointing to a style and a direction.
Well, I think that's great. That's great advice. I would think, anytime that you can, practice your skills, or kind of, the more tools, or, the more technique that you have available to yourself, it's like having paints in your palette, right?
Hmm.
The
Exactly.
more colors you have to paint with, the more options you bring, the better for sure.
Yeah.
So those are really great suggestions. And especially in today's day and age, we live in the world of such small cameras, so much movement, so much shaky cam. That's kind of come and gone a little bit, but we've got mockumentary style or documentary style film. Everything is shot with so much movement now.
Hmm.
I think it's a great idea to go back to those older eras when cameras weighed a couple 100 pounds.
And I think even a great, example of that too, of the modern style you're talking about, which was trying to emulate old style, was La La Land.
Ah,
I didn't love La La Land, and the reason
okay.
for that was I found if you're trying to emulate the style of a 50s golden age musical with those big, heavy, bulky cameras and those sweeping dolly moves and things like that, shooting your entire movie on Steadicam to save time is not the way to do that. And
Yeah,
so that movie really, I think, was a perfect example to me, at least. And a lot of people like that movie, so I don't want to, shit on people's opinions. But
right.
that movie, to me at least, was a really great example of
Interesting.
how to, what not to do when you're trying to use a kind of reserved, when you're emulating a very reserved style of filming.
Okay.
It just sort of took me out of
I
the
personally
film.
liked the film.
Hmm.
Interesting. I didn't like it. I don't get digress here too far. I didn't actually get into it the first time I tried to watch it. I only watched
Hmm.
about 15 minutes of it. I turned it off and then I rewatched it at a later date, and I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But that might be to great extent because its content spoke very specifically to me
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
had a lot of elements of my personal story that I really, really, really resonated with.
Hmm.
So the movie really spoke to me. I'd have to go back and look. I didn't notice, that I didn't notice what you have just called out, but maybe I'll check that film out again and see what I think, and
Yeah.
maybe provide a counter or maybe agree
I mean,
with
it's that's
your
the thing
argument.
is,
But
again, it's to me, I look, and maybe that wasn't, I haven't spoken to Damien Chazelle, so maybe his point wasn't to perfectly emulate
right,
it, but I think it's a good example in that of you compare the America scene from West Side Story versus the opening to La La Land, and I just go, okay, where does America do things really well? Where does West Side
hmm,
Story do things really well and feel really immersive versus what's taking you out of a scene like the opening in La La Land? And again, it's a
yeah,
popular movie that a lot of people love, so
yeah.
I'm likely in the minority on that one. But I do think that analyzing it in that way and kind of looking at the differences between um, a movie that's emulating those things versus the original sources is really an interesting kind of if educational
Yeah.
experience.
Well, right. Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting. I'll go back and take a look at that. But for now, we'll pull ourselves back a little bit
Hmm.
to Herzog's lesson. But I love these digressions, though. This is like one of the wonderful things about filmmaking. I mean, everything is connected to everything, and I mean, obviously, if you love film, you could go off on all of these tangents for weeks and months and
Yes. Yeah.
lifetimes, frankly, lifetimes. So far for me, it's been, about 30 years that I've gone off on this tangent to film. So, and with no signs of slowing down yet. So, so that's one of the wonderful. It's such a rich and complex medium that it's a blast. So, well, let's move into documentary filmmaking. So, in the second half here of this lesson, Herzog speaks specifically to shooting docs.
Hmm.
And right off the bat, he talks about, and this makes sense. This is in line with basically everything else that he's said up until this point about filmmaking in general, is to keep things small. You set up and shoot quickly.
Hmm.
And that is, he's always about maintaining urgency, right? He's maintaining flexibility, maintaining urgency. You don't want to lose momentum. You want to keep an intensity, and I think he's spoken to all those things quite a few times. I totally agree. But he also, there's something else that's important to think of here, and I've run into this numerous times when I'm shooting documentary type footage, when I'm shooting interviews, and that's that you got to remember when you're shooting a documentary, everybody that's going to be in front of your camera is not going to be a professional filmmaker. They're not an actor, they aren't trained. And most people feel uncomfortable in front of a camera. And they definitely are going to feel uncomfortable and can be intimidated if you've got a huge crew with a ton of lights,
Yeah.
booms. I
Yeah.
mean, the more people you've got, the bigger the footprint you've got, the more likely you are to intimidate, and that's actually an important an important thing to remember. And also too, most or many situations, at least when it comes to documentary filmmaking, you're not going to be allowed to have a lot of, just logistically, you're
Hmm.
not going to be let into most places if you have a huge
Yeah, your
crew.
locations are a huge aspect of that. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, just learning to shoot quickly with a small crew is going to be of such a huge benefit in a documentary film. I would say even more so than a narrative, just
Hmm.
because it's likely that the logistics of it won't allow you to shoot with a large crew.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah. He also, and you and I have talked, I think this, in line with shooting coverage versus really knowing exactly you want to shoot. He talks about not leaving camera decisions to post, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I know you've got some thoughts on this, but Herzog's like, look, just because you're shooting in 4K, 6K, 8K, 12K, whatever it might be, don't leave your framing to post.
Yeah.
Don't just shoot with the idea that, like, I can I can just compose this any way I want in post. I can crop in.
It should be
Herzog
a
is it
last resort at most.
at most. Yeah, tell me about your experience with that. Yeah,
I've done it. I'll say like guilty as charged in that I've
right,
shot in 4K, and it's not even a resolution thing for me because I think that you could realistically get a short shot that is 700 or 720p on a movie theater screen, and I think that most general audiences would hardly notice.
right.
But it's not even like the lowering the resolution. It's nothing like that. I just think that, again, going back to the accuracy of what you're shooting,
Yeah,
that you should just
focused intent.
you're gonna even just the way that lenses work, that like there's aspects to barrel distortion on lenses that if you start rearranging a shot, that there's going to be wonky side effects that you just
Right.
may slip past you, that are going to show up. And it's the accuracy, and I think that anybody who's going in and shooting, purposefully wide and then saying, but we'll just crop it in a little bit, is doing themselves a disservice and doing the visuals of their movie a disservice.
Yeah,
I've done that. I've
in an
cropped in,
emergency. Yeah,
in emergencies, yeah, in a situation where I go, oh, either there's something on the edge of the frame that looks too awkward to be there, or it's distracting that I just didn't notice was in there, or sometimes it's something like, the B cam failed in an interview, and so I just need to get a closer
yeah.
up shot, and
You've
it's
got right to change
but
perspective
again, it
enough
should
to, yeah.
be it should be your last resort. It should be something that, because it's not. I won't say that it is like the worst thing in the world, but it is certainly something that if you're going, it all comes down to on set. Like if it's something that you're going into thinking of on set, that, oh, we're going to recrop this, then you're going to be less specific and less
I
accurate with your
agreed.
camera. Whereas
It,
if you do it in post just as a saving measure, then that's, to me, I
it's a
don't
different
really take
thing.
issue. Yeah, exactly.
Right, and I agree. I think it just comes back again to it's about decision procrastination. I mean, why? Why are you pushing that decision back? Again, I think it's the same argument people use to shoot a lot of coverage as that they use to do this, which is, well, hey, look, if we're on a high res camera here, let's shoot real wide, and then we have all the flexibility in the world to reframe this in post.
Hmm.
It just never works out that way, though. You end
No,
up getting
yeah,
to post. I mean, imagine, think about it. You get into post with 100 hours of footage,
or 300.
300 hours of
Yeah.
footage, and on top of that, it's all basically unframed,
Yeah.
right? I mean, come on, seriously? You
It's like
think that you're going to make
you're
a
putting. I mean, again, it's like you've put something in a paper shredder and now you're taping it together afterwards to make the Mona Lisa. Like, you're not gonna get it.
I think just psychologically, when you move with purpose, when you have a focused intent, when you're present there on the day, you should be making those decisions on the day, right? It's
Yes.
not like, I mean, a painter doesn't paint a painting on like an extra large canvas and then, you know, take it, and then give it to somebody and be like, well, you can kind of like crop this however you want. I just made it like really huge. it's extra big, and then you can just cut this canvas so that it's it's like, come on, that you should be working with and that's where I guess vision, right? It's like you should have the vision, you should be executing that vision. And I know a lot of people are gonna, some people are gonna say, but wow, I leave myself so many options in editing if I do this. And I hope I can articulate this well enough. I just don't think that's the case. I think what you end up with is just a bunch of generic garbage.
Yes.
Yes. Actually, yeah.
It's generic. That's a perfect way to put it, is that you're not gonna, if you're not making specific decisions, then you're not gonna have anything special.
Yeah. And so speaking of garbage, I mean, and this is huge. Herzog has said, look, collect the remarkable. Yes. Not garbage, right? We're not garbage collectors. Yeah. We're filmmakers.
If you shoot through, as he says too, if you shoot 300 hours, you don't know what you're doing, and it's harsh, but I think it's
so.
True.
If you shoot 300 hours, you don't know what you're doing, and I've been there. Not 300 hours, but I have been in my own way at that place, and I can tell you from experience, it's totally true.
And then you sit back and you go, oh God, how am I going to get through this? Yeah.
And I don't know if he says this in another lesson. I think he might, or maybe it's in some other interviews, but look, we're not flies on the wall. Mm-hmm. We're not security cameras, right? I mean, a security camera just records all day, every day, waiting for something interesting to happen.
I'm sure you could make a movie out of that, but it'd probably be pretty boring.
Don't do that. Don't do that as a filmmaker.
Sorry, I shouldn't put that out on the internet because it's going to get in someone's head and they're going to do it.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that as a filmmaker. Yeah. Move with purpose, move with focus and vision. And, the idea is that in what I love about Herzog, what really stands out to me is his obsession with new images as he defines them, to finding new imagery to bring to people, to bring to an audience, to help. Storytelling is about helping us understand who we are and why we're here, and what is this thing that we're doing, which is life. What is this experience that is existence? It's helping us find a way to understand that. All storytelling.
Totally, yeah. And just to kind of reiterate that it's, imagine yourself as an audience member and think of how exciting it is to see something new on the screen.
You're right.
When you watch a movie and it's like, I've never seen this before. That's the most amazing feeling in the world.
And that will very, very rarely happen on accident if you just keep your camera rolling long enough. Yeah. And if it does happen, if you do happen to get that, you're likely to be drowning in footage and you won't be able to find it anyway.
And you probably won't be able to replicate it.
You've got to make it. You've got to execute vision and make it happen. So, right. Yes, we are not garbage collectors. We are filmmakers. And what a fantastic final quote to end this episode on. Wow, man. As always,
nice October
Cullen,
night.
It was a good one. This was a good one. I had a blast. So, well, thanks everybody for listening. I hope that it was as enjoyable for you as it was for us. Next episode, we will be jumping into lesson 11, which is going to be a good one. It's not the gear, it's you. Oh, this will be a good one. And I know you're a gearhead.
There we go.
Cullen, yeah, so this is going to be a good one.
We'll have a good talk. Yeah.
All right. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.